Live?
Yes, we are. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to the regularly scheduled Oxnard City Council Finance and Governance Committee meeting. The date today is November 10th, 2020, and we'll have the city clerk take the roll, please.
Member Lopez?
Here.
Member Perello?
Here.
Chair Flynn?
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum, and the agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall kiosk on Tuesday, November 3rd.
Very well. We'll go to the very first item, which of course is the flag salute. So all rise, please. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Be seated, please. So the first item on the agenda, item B, public comments on items not on the agenda. It looks like we do have one speaker, and that's Lawrence Paul Stein, please.
Good morning, Larry. We're on items not on the agenda, and you have 2 minutes to address the committee. Please begin now.
Thanks very much. Members of the council, I'm somewhat concerned with the lack of commitment by city council when it comes to funding of our parks. I keep hearing about 5-year plans on capital improvement projects. These parks have been in discussion since 1992 for what is now known as Sports Park. Cobb's Park has been in discussion since 2000. And Campus Park again has been acquired by the city in the 1990s, and the pools have not been built. Again, we have these improvements. We have a planned budget for capital improvement projects of $40 to $60 million, close to $6 million. And City Council has not taken any steps to appropriate funds for the parks in the last 25 plus years. It's my recommendation that Park Master Plan be rejected until City Council actually approves financing for the parks. We problems with fire station. The fire station was built through a bond through Measure O. Again, all these parks have not done any action by the City Council, and I recommend that we submit a proposal to bond for a bond of $60 million to have it allocated for our parks. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And Madam City Clerk, is it correct that Mr. Stein was the only speaker on this item?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to item C, consent agenda. What's the pleasure of the committee on the approval of the minutes, item 1?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, Madam City Clerk, we have a motion by Committee Member Lopez and a second by Committee Member Perello. The vote, please.
Member Lopez?
Yes.
Member Perello?
Yes.
Chair Flynn?
Aye.
The motion carries 3-0.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to the second page of the agenda, which is under reports, item D. The very first item under the Finance Department, the subject, 2020 water revenue bonds. The recommendation that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend, number 1, that the City Council adopt a resolution approving an installment purchase agreement, indenture of trust, a continuing disclosure agreement, an escrow agreement, and bond purchase agreement with respect to the issuance by the City of Oxnard Financing Authority of bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $35 million in one or more series as federally tax exempt and taxable bonds, approving a preliminary official statement and authorizing preparation of a final official statement and other matters pertaining thereto. And two, that the Board of Directors of the City of Oxnard Financing Authority adopt a resolution approving an installment purchase agreement, indenture of trust, a continuing disclosure agreement, an escrow agreement, and bond purchase agreement with respect to the issuance of bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed 35 million in one or more of a series of federally tax exempt and taxable bonds, appointing a trustee, approving a preliminary official statement, and authorizing preparation of a final official statement and other matters pertaining thereto. And we'll have the Finance Director, Mr. Kevin Riper, start the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. As always with bond presentations, the city's municipal advisor, financial advisor, NHA advisors will make the PowerPoint presentation. You've heard numerous times over the last 3 years from Craig Hill and Mike Meyer of NHA advisors. So Craig will give the presentation, and at the very end, I have a small piece of late breaking news to append to Mr. Hill's comments. Craig?
Great, thank you, Kevin. Yes, before you today is an item related to the Water Enterprise Fund. These are the 2020 water revenue bonds. Next slide, please. As the mayor mentioned, the objective of today's agenda item is to make a recommendation to the City Council as well as the Board of Directors for the Finance Authority to approve resolutions and a number of bond documents specific to the issuance of 2020 water revenue bonds. Next slide, please. The justification for the bond issue is really primarily two projects that the Public Works is working on, with a total of about $25 million in projects. We are also looking, as we've mentioned to the council and to this committee in the past, to always look at opportunities to reduce interest rates and save, in this case, the ratepayers' funds. There is an opportunity right now to refinance the 2010A and the 2012 bonds. If market conditions hold and it makes economic sense, we will include them in the financing should the council approve this financing. And those represent roughly $5 million of additional bonds. So what you heard from the mayor with regards to the not to exceed, it's really $25 million in projects plus some refunding pieces. Next slide, please. So what you will have, should we move forward on this financing, is a traditional bond issuance using the city's Oxford Financing Authority. Our firm, NHA Advisors, will be involved, as well as a pair of legal firms that have been doing work for the city now for the last 3 years. Best and Krieger will serve as bond counsel, Nixon Peabody as disclosure counsel. That's the preliminary official statement and the final official statement. Wells Fargo will serve as trustee, as it does for all of the other bond issues for the city. And we did go through an RFP process for the underwriting, and Stifel Nicholas was selected as the firm for this particular water bond transaction. Next slide, please. So what we have, as I mentioned in the intro, is the intent of really funding the majority of two new projects. One is to offset groundwater shortages and allow for future growth. That's the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project. Kevin will speak to that shortly. The other one is the Recycle Pipeline Project that's been in the works for years and just received bids as well. So we'll be putting bond proceeds into the project fund to handle that. We are, as I mentioned, looking to optimize and reduce the impact on the water rates for the citizens of the city. So we are looking at, given where we are in interest rates and historical lows, amortizing this over actually a 35-year period of time. That will play in line with the type of improvements that we're doing and the expected useful life of those improvements. Next slide, please. There is a small component, as I mentioned, for potentially refinancing the 2010A and the 2012 bonds. As you can see on this slide, there it's relatively small, 3.6 million of the 2010A and approximately $6 million outstanding on the 2012. Those outstanding interest rates are for the the 2010A, approximately 5.5%. And we believe that in the current market conditions, we can refinance that piece down to about 2.25. So that's, over half of the current rate. And that will certainly save in the interest payments that are being made. On the 2012 bonds, a slightly larger issue, it currently has a rate of just over 4%. And we believe that we may be able to get that down to inside of 2.5%, therefore saving approximately $120,000 over the next 9 years. Next slide, please. So what really is being proposed as part of this bond transaction is a Series A tax exempt of about $25 million. That would include the projects that we're talking about and that a small piece of the refunding. The Series B bonds would be about $5.5 million, and under current federal tax rules would be required to be considered municipal taxable. They're still tax exempt for California investors, but the federal government looks at them as like you would if you were investing in treasuries. And those would be used to just refinance the 2012 bonds. All of these new bonds for 2020 would be on parity with the existing bonds that are outstanding for the Water Enterprise Fund. So we think about them collectively as one big obligation for purposes of the city's obligation to meet covenants on setting certain water rates so that you're sufficient to pay debt service. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're looking at amortizing the new money or the project piece of this financing over 35 years in line with the useful life of the project. That represented in the orange color on the slide. The gray bars are the balance of the outstanding bonds that we have now, and the blue represents the refunding piece, or what is responsible for basically the 2012s. And you can see that there was about 9 years left on that, so we'll be shaving off and making some savings in the earlier years. We were trying to minimize the rise in debt service, understanding that there will be future demands on the water fund for other projects that may potentially need to be financed in the next few years. So keeping the debt service as level or as low as we can will help to offset the need to really raise rates higher. Next slide, please. The schedule as proposed right now is we've gone through credit ratings. S&P did reaffirm the A rating for the city. That was what we got in 2018 when we were involved in it. They did note that the city is continuing to make good improvements from some of the findings that were represented in prior years. We consider that a good indication of the city moving in a positive direction. Generally, the rating agencies with this pandemic have been putting pressure to lower the ratings. And in this case, they held you as an A stable. So that is very good. They're continuing to, recognize that there will be a cost of service study that needs to be done, new rates that will need to be implemented to cover some of the increasing costs on the enterprise fund. So that's some of the stuff that they'll be looking for over the next year or two. We should also mention at this point in time, we did, as part of that credit process, go out to the bond insurance companies, and this is the credit enhancement component that the city's used in the past, and received a very aggressive bid from Build America Mutual, or BAM, who has also insured some of the city's bonds in the past. In addition, because of the type of projects that you're proposed to do, they're recognizing this particular bond as a green star bond, so as a green bond, if you will, which will attract some of the impact investors out there that are really looking for stuff that is moving in the right direction from an environmental perspective. So with that, what we are looking for obviously today with finance and governance is to move this to the city council next week. Should the city council approve, should the recommendation from the KIT committee happen today and the council approve the resolutions next week, we would be in the market in early December with the intent of funding the projects by the end of the year. Next slide, please. So with that, what we're asking of the committee is the recommendation to move this item forward to the city council for both the city council and the financing authority for approval. As the mayor mentioned at the beginning, I won't restate the resolutions and all of the miscellaneous documents that are included as part of this financing package. And with that, my counterparty, Mike Meyer, is on as well, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. We do have 3 speakers. I'd like to call those speakers up now, starting, and I'll read the names. First speaker is James Aragon, be followed by Lawrence.
Mayor, this is Kevin. Could I make my
Yes.
one last point on slide 5, if we could go back
Oh,
there?
absolutely.
Clerk?
Go ahead.
I mentioned it in my introductory remarks, some late breaking good news. The 2 sub-bullets on the first bullet on this slide talk about the project cost that's being financed here, and the Public Works Department's construction contract and procurement process produced a project cost for the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project, the first one that's listed there, of just $5.0 million when all the bids came in and were opened and vetted, not 6.25, as was assumed in all of the bond analyses and the documents and the PowerPoint and the staff report. So we're keeping the proposed bond issue at the flat, nice round number of $30 million. That means there'll be $1.25 million to spend on other water system related projects from the savings that Public Works generated in the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project. The second project, Winemy Road Recycle Water Pipeline, came in at right on top of $18.65 million project cost. So that's the late breaking good news.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riper.
Mayor.
That's excellent. Yes.
Mayor, may I ask you 2 technical questions before we have the public speakers?
Well, why don't we?
All right, okay. I'll wait.
If
I'll
it's
wait.
just clarifying, okay. Why don't we go to the speakers first, get that out of the way, and then we'll have enough time to ask any questions you'd
All
like. Okay, we have 3 speakers, and I'll read their names in the order in which their speaker cards were submitted. James Aragon, Lawrence Paul Stein, and James Lavery. So Jim Lavery. So why don't we go to Mr. Aragon, to be followed by Mr. Stein, please.
Hi, James. We're on D1 and you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Hello, everyone. James, obviously. Just have a quick question. Well, one of the things I noticed was in this presentation to City Council, if it does move forward for next week, is that the total cost isn't presented. First of all, this is a brilliant idea. It's a great time to borrow money. But the bond cost payment for over 35 years is about $56.5 million. I mean, I think that would be something that would be worthwhile presenting to City Council. Also, question is do these projects over the 35-year life cycle pay for themselves, or is this so the water delivery to the agricultural lands on Winemy Road, are they paying for it over the 35 years, or is it subsidized water delivery for that 35 years? And that's all the question I would have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go through all the speakers and then we'll allow the combination of staff members to address those issues. Next speaker is Lawrence Paul Stein, to be followed by James Lavery, please.
Hi, Larry. We're on the water bond issue and you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
all the question I would have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm somewhat concerned why the 40,000 ratepayers who not received the benefit for the current bond issues 2010, 2012, and the paying of these bond issues for 8+ years have not received the direct benefit from the proceeds of these bonds. They've been paying down the debt, but not getting the water. Meanwhile, the people receiving the water are not paying down the debt. So perhaps the people receiving the great water at this point in time can be paying off the debt of these new bonds and have the taxpayers, not the ratepayers, the 40,000 commercial and residential customers who have been paying the debt service for the last 8 years have not received the benefit. It should be forgiven of this and have the current users of the Great Water Program pay for the debt service. They're getting the benefit but not paying the debt service. This does not seem to be fair, and to me seems to violate Prop 218. So please explain to me why the ratepayers, the 40,000 people, are being asked to pay for this bond, not getting the benefit from this for the last 8 years, and paying on the refinancing of these bonds. Please have that explained to me so I understand it. Thank you much for your time and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to the next speaker, James Lavery.
Hi, Jim. We're on the water bonds item, and you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate the presentation, and I appreciate the city aggressively refinancing its debt and trying to do the right thing. But I still have, there's an ongoing issue I have with this administration. It has to do with cash flows. Like, there's a lot of assertions that they want to keep rates lower because they want to have to raise rates, but there's no actually cash flows to say, well, is there actual pressure on water rates? What do the fund balances look like? Where are the cash flows for the water fund or for any other funds that haven't been updated in a long time? So to me, just asserting that there's pressure on rates or there's enough debt service times over, that's well and good to say it, but prove it, show it to us. So I have a problem with, this happens all the time with these type of things. There's actually no cash flows that substantiate what staff and a consultant are saying. Now, specifically, as far as the two projects themselves, how do we know that those are viable projects? Do they pencil out? What is the cost benefit of these projects? So in other words, you're building a pipeline for farmers, but you have contracts with these farmers. What happens if something, doesn't work and it's not, the city loses money? How do we know this project is worth it? Is it like one of the famous Alaska bridge to nowhere, where you build it and nobody comes, or you can't get water, or the farmers can get water cheaper somewhere else? So I don't understand how these projects are going to work as standalone projects. And the last thing is, why not pay? Not the last thing. Why not pay off these things covered? It seems like the city has enough cash on hand. One fund had $30 million, and the other fund had $18 million, $48 million, and these projects cost $25 million combined. So why not just pay them out of cash that you have already, instead of having to finance them, put more burden on the taxpayers, notwithstanding the lifetime of the project, discounting that argument. So
30 seconds.
And the other thing, the last thing I'd like to have answered is the wrapping of the debt. Why are you doing interest-only debt in the first years versus a level debt service? You said why. You said, again, pressure on rates in it. And you haven't shown the difference between level debt service that you're proposing. So I don't know. As I'm saying, is there enough information for this panel and other people to make a decision? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And all three speakers now, Madam City Clerk, that concludes the speakers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Mr. Riper, a lot of questions were asked by the speakers. Could we try to address as many of those questions as possible, please?
Of course, Chair. Mr. Aragon asked about total cost over the 35-year life of the bond. The total cost is presented in Exhibit A to the staff report and to the two resolutions. He also asked, are the projects over their 35-year life cycle, will they pay for themselves? A similar question to Mr. Lavery's question of, do these projects make sense on a standalone basis? I will defer to the Public Works Department, but I will point out to both speakers that the projects are not standalone projects. They're part of an entire water system, and I'm sure Public Works will touch on that. Mr. Stein's comments were unintelligible here in the chamber, so I'll be happy to talk to him offline and see what he was getting at. Mr. Lavery asked about cash flows for the water fund. The reason that we are not proposing to pay cash for these projects is explained at great length in the staff report. The projects have a 40 or a 50-year life. We're able to bond for them over 35 years, the longest bond issue Oxnard has ever issued, in order to match the costs of paying for the project with the ratepayers who will benefit from them. Why should today's ratepayers subsidize people who haven't even moved here for 40 or 50 years by paying their scarce cash today for projects that are going to deliver benefits for 40 or 50 years? That is not an equitable policy solution. But Mr. Lavery does raise a good question about what will happen in the cash in the water fund, of which there is more than is required under council policy. And the staff report also goes to great lengths to explain that the automated meter infrastructure CIP project is proposed to spend almost $6 million a year for each of the next 4 years, cash, to replace the meter reading infrastructure, the metering and meter reading infrastructure in the water fund. That project is a much shorter life, so it makes sense to take cash and pay for a short-lived project with cash while bonding for long-lived projects like the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project and the Winemy Road Pipeline Extension. Mr. Hill will answer the debt service wrapping question, and then we'll ask the Public Works Department to talk about the two projects that Mr. Aragon and Mr. Lavery asked about. Craig?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. So we did do a number of analysis or quantitative work related to whether we made a level debt service or a wrap solution. And the speaker was absolutely correct that what is being proposed right now, and this has not been written in stone yet, but what is being recommended is that we do interest only in the earlier years to just avoid, in that graph that you saw, raising the earlier year total debt service payments for all that's outstanding, only then to have it really drop off of a cliff and be relatively low on the back end. I think from our firm's position on this is that given where we are in historical low interest rates, this is the opportunity to actually have a mortgage, if you will, at a low rate for the term that you're talking about. So if we're not questioning the 35-year repayment for everything that the CFO just mentioned, then we would advocate for capturing that interest rate, that low interest rate, for a longer term. If you, in effect, have level debt service, yes, you are paying off more principal sooner than you otherwise. It's still a 35-year financing or amortization, but you would not be taking advantage of that low interest rate for a longer period of time. So we are happy to bring both of those scenarios back to show what it would really do. But the actual amortization would be really much more dramatic on those earlier years in terms of using cash to pay debt service on top of all the other outstanding debt.
Hi, good morning. My name is Tian. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director. I'm here to answer the questions about the two projects. The two projects, the Winemy Road and the ASR projects, goes hand in hand. Let me give you guys the link why we needed both and not just one. In 2014, the City Council approved the Wainimi Pipeline projects agreement with 5 agricultural communities to send recycle over to the seawater intrusion area, which is located in the west part of the city and also a little bit outside the city. So the agreement said, we'll sell you the recycled water for a cost listed in the agreement. In return, we also will take your groundwater allocation and transfer it for our own pumping. And why do we do that? So at that time, the city is already foreseeing that in the future, we're going to have limited drinking water supply, especially in the aquifer. So to do this project, as you sell the water, you wanted to make sure that you replenish your groundwater allocations. So how does this aquifer storage recovery project comes to play? So if you just take those groundwater allocation, you try to pump it and then disinfect it and send it to the customer. At today's standard, drinking water standard, you couldn't do that. It's because the mineral content is too high. That's why the other project come from, the aquifer storage and recovery, because you have purified water, you inject that into the ground, you hold it per today's permit, it's about 3.5 months. Once you pump it out, the quality of that water stay, it doesn't degrade because it hasn't been diluted by the natural groundwater. When you pump it out, you mix them all together. That would meet the drinking water standards. So that's why those two projects goes hand in hand. Now, as far as technology, I think there was a question talks about, hey, is it a proven technology? What if it's failed? Well, let's talk about the pipeline. The pipeline, the agreement was approved in 2014. The city then able to get a lease line from Cayuga's Municipal Water District to send the water to them as early as 2015 and 16. So as of today, we're already banking about 7,000 to 8,000 acre feet of groundwater allocations that we have. So after that many years, I don't see that technology will fail. As far as the ASR project, if you look at Orange County, they have over 20 years of experience working with this aquifer. So it's a proven technology. So I don't think those will fail. Now, as far as the O&M, managing those projects, so we have adequate engineering staff now to manage those construction projects. Plus, once 12 months later, after the project is started up, we also have adequate water staffing to be able to continue to focus on what we're here to do, to make sure that our customers, residents, and businesses have adequate water supply to meet the future challenges.
Thank you very much for those explanations from the staff members. And why don't we go ahead and start with Committee Member Perillo, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Again, very thorough. Thank you for the members of the public that asked the questions. On slide number 6, when we're talking about the refinancing of the fees and we give the estimated cost, the estimated interest rates from the refinancing, and we talk about the savings, have we figured in the fees, external fees that would go with this item?
Yes, we have.
Okay, thank you. On slide number 8, when the question was asked by one of the speakers and it was answered by the consultant, maybe in the future when we bring this to the council, a little clearer explanation of why, maybe a slide or some sort of a drawing of why you want to use limited amount of money payments up front instead of paying the principal. I think the explanation was clear, but sometimes a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I do subscribe to, and we'll use an analogy of parents, grandparents, kids, grandkids, and great-grandparents. Great-grandpa and grandma shouldn't pay the whole tilt for the great-grandkids that are further down the line, and they get a free ride, and great-grandpa and grandma were eating pork and beans for the rest of their life. These costs have to be spread out to the entire community. And I appreciate the thinking that goes with my city staff on that matter. On slide number 9, I would like a little more of an explanation with the gentleman's mention of, and I believe the exact words were credit enhancement bid. We got something for a credit enhancement. And that's the only other question I have. And I greatly appreciate this and I support the item.
NHA advisors, please take Member Perello's question on credit enhancement. And
yes, great question. Thank you very much for that. So as we mentioned, the Standard & Poor's, which is the rating agency, has reaffirmed the city's A rating, right? So we have AAA, AA, single A, triple B, double B, single B. That's kind of the rating process for bonds. In the case of the city, the Water Enterprise Fund maintains a straight A rating. And one of the things that we can do to further reduce the interest rate is to enhance or make the credit even better. So you can buy bond insurance, we call it a credit wrap, from a third-party insurance company, in this case, Build America Mutual. You pay them a one-time premium, and they basically insure the bonds for the life of the bond. So you use their credit rating, which is a AA. And what that'll do is that'll reduce the interest rate. And what we're constantly doing working with the underwriters is we want to make sure we're not going to pay that premium if it doesn't enhance and overall lower the interest rate or the all-in cost, if you will, to the city. So, in my example, if they want to charge $100,000 as a premium, but the total payments on a present value don't go below or save you more than 100,000, we don't want to use it, right? So anything that we can do to further reduce the total interest cost to the city, that's one of the things that we're looking at. And in this case, we were able to get Build America Mutual to give us a very aggressive bid or premium charge. And we will be all the way up until the day we price the bonds. We will be evaluating whether that makes sense or not. Right now, all indications are because it's such a low premium that it will make sense to use the credit enhancement to effectively make the bonds a AA bond and therefore have a lower interest rate to the city. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Hill. I appreciate that. Very detailed, and even I understand that. So thank you very much. I appreciate it greatly. Those are all my questions, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee Member Lopez, please.
Yes, thank you. This is very informative. I just have a few follow-up questions to clarify. If Mr. Riker can clarify, the total amount is 35 million, or is it 30? Is it 30 or 35 million? I think I heard two different numbers, so I just wanted to clarify that, and to also clarify if the total amount that is issued is not spent, what happens, or do we expect that it will all be used? And then the second question I have is, do we have a limit or a cap on the amount of bonds that can be issued, and does that depend on the series of the bonds?
yes, so I'll answer the second question first. There is a cap in both resolutions on the amount of bonds that can be issued, and that cap is $35 million. The bond financing team always sets a higher cap than the current estimate of how much bond proceeds will be needed, which is $30 million. That's why you heard two different numbers, Member Lopez. If market conditions change such that investors want a higher par amount with a lower interest rate, we want the flexibility for Stifel Nicholas on underwriting day, on sales day, to increase the par amount up to no higher than $35 million, even though currently we expect to issue only 30. So that's the reason for the difference between the two numbers.
Thank you. And sorry, just to follow up on the cap that can be issued, do we have a general cap in the city on how much we can issue in bonds?
The city's debt management policies don't have a cap, but there's a practical cap imposed by the capital markets and imposed by our debt service coverage covenants and other rate covenants. So there's a de facto cap.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's amazing because any of the questions or most of the questions that I've had have been addressed and answered. And it makes a lot of sense that if we have existing debt and we can almost have the interest rate on that debt, then, I mean, there's really no disadvantage to that I can think of. And as far as the future projects, the Winding Road Pipeline Project, as well as the ASR at Campus Park, the fact of the matter is that we're going forward with a plan that is going to provide water for the residents of the city of Oxnard, given the fact that there is a scarcity of water in the state of California. And we know that scarcity is a permanent situation. So rather than a shortage, which that fluctuates based on the rainfall each year, but overall, because of the climate, not only climate change, but in particular, just California and a semi-arid climate, there is a scarcity of water, where there's not really a scarcity of water in other parts of the country. So it makes us very dependent on imported water, and imported water is becoming more and more expensive. I think I thought that imported water was $1,400 an acre foot, and an acre foot provides enough water for 2 families on an annual basis. And going back into the water recycling program, Mr. Stein and others have questioned the financial and even functional viability of this water investment system. And the questions have been actually good questions. The one that's a little bit mysterious is whether or not you you take on any kind of debt for any kind of capital improvement. And certainly, I mean, I think that's a self-explanatory, or should be self-explanatory, that all capital improvement projects, for the most, or not all, but most capital improvement projects take on debt, and that future generations and future, that's going to be paid off over an extended period of what that capital improvement will be delivering in terms of its function. But I think my only question too, which is a finance-related question, is that in the past, the city has had some issues with incurring bond debt that's taxable and untaxable. And could we have either one of the finance team members or anyone explain, in the case of these bonds, that they are all taxable or some are untaxable? Can you explain the difference and why those options are available?
Yeah, NHA advisors, you want to answer that? And then I'll talk about spending the bond proceeds.
Sure. So as the city has done in 95% of its access to the capital markets, those have been traditional tax exempt bonds. So any new project that gets funded for the most part is going to be done tax exempt, and most refundings have been done tax exempt. The law was changed a couple of years ago that did not allow advance refundings to remain tax exempt. So what I mean by advance refundings, some of the outstanding bonds, in this case, the 2012s, they can't actually be paid off for a period extending beyond 90 days, unlike a mortgage where you kind of pay it off right away. So when it's deemed to be an advance refunding, it has to be done as taxable. It isn't a negative, and because the amortization is so short, the actual rate, as you saw on the slide, the cost of borrowing to refinance that, even in a taxable, is really low. So we don't see, there's been a massive amount of taxable municipal bonds that have been issued in the last year by a number of your peers in California and throughout the state. So it is something that we don't look at a taxable as a negative, whereas 10 years ago, when you issued taxable bonds, it was for maybe a marginal project or something that had a private benefit use. I will clarify that the 2012 bonds will actually get paid off in June of 21. So they're not really that outstanding for that long, but it's longer than the 90 days that the IRS will let us have as a window to pay them off. So did that answer your question?
Yes, that answer, well, and I mean, I had a basic understanding of it, but I think your answer was even more thorough. And I think this issue has come up in the past about taxable and untaxable bond incurrence. So I think it makes it clear to me or evident about what it is that the city is doing and why, if there's a private benefit use, kind of clarified that if there is a private benefit use, then it can be deemed taxable. And then there's also this time period, this 90 days where the state law changed. And I think you made that abundantly clear what that is. So thank you very much for that answer. It's my
Chair Flynn, this is
Yes.
Kevin again.
Yeah.
Your question about spending the bond proceeds reminds me that I overlooked Member Lopez's question about the same topic. So when the bonds are sold and the documents for them signed for the tax exempt bonds, under the Internal Revenue Code, the city manager will be signing a document that says the city fully expects to spend most of the bond proceeds within 3 years and all of them within 5. The city has a reasonable expectation to do that. As the Public Works Department is tired of hearing from me, that means the pressure's on to execute the projects, do contracts, and get the money out the door, because that's what we're saying to the IRS that allows these bonds to be tax exempt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riper. What is the pleasure of the committee on this item?
Move the recommended action.
Second.
Okay, Madam City Clerk, we have a motion by Committee Member Perillo and a second by Committee Member Lopez. The vote, please.
Member Lopez,
Yes.
Member Perillo,
Yes.
Chair Flynn.
Aye.
The motion carries 3-0.
Okay, we'll move on to item 2. Thank you very much for the presentation and excellent work.
Yes,
Let's,
I completely. Thank you for our staff answering the questions clearly. It's tremendous difference in the last few years. Tremendous.
Item 2, Fire Department, subject Ventura County COVID-19 City Assistance Program. The recommendation is that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution ratifying the subrecipient agreement between Ventura County and the City of Oxnard for coronavirus relief funds, otherwise known as CRF, and authorizing and approving the execution and submittal by the city manager or designee of any additional agreements, forms, and documentation that may be required regarding the city's allocation of such funds. And it looks like the interim fire chief is here to give a presentation, Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton?
Committee chair and committee members, thank you. And just so, as a point of explanation, I'm actually up here providing this presentation because the fire department's management analyst too, Amy Van Adder, is sort of been taking the lead on COVID-related relief funds. And so she's just putting the finishing touches on our first request to FEMA for request for public assistance. And that's for sort of personal protective equipment costs and things like that. That's going to be in the amount of just under $200,000. So that's just another example of some of the things that she's been doing. But she, along with Casey Clay from payroll and Adam Smith from the city manager's office, have put together the work on this particular item. So this should be a pretty straightforward, as committee chair mentioned. Looking for the Finance and Government Committee to recommend City Council adopt this resolution ratifying the subrecipient agreement. And so just as a little bit of background, back in October, the Ventura County Board of Supervisors approved $5 million of CRF funds to be distributed to cities based on population. There was an additional $100,000 that was given to the 5 cities with populations of less than 50,000. The city of Oxnard's allocation out of that $5 million is there, just under $1.4 million. These are the three primary categories that that we could use for these coronavirus relief funds, and the city has decided that these costs will be put towards the labour costs. The second item there, labour costs substantially dedicated to public health and public safety, which is payroll for police and fire, is primarily what finance is going to use the funds for. And so, as you can see there, with a motion of this committee, we can move this to the full council and have this agreement ratified so that we can receive the funds. I believe by November 27th, I think, is the target date. And just a little bit further information. This does not require a local match or anything. This is just a one-time funding relief. And so, and as I mentioned, this will offset existing payroll costs for police and fire. And with that, if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to entertain.
Very well. Madam City Clerk, we don't have speakers on this item. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, we'll go to Committee Member Lopez. Committee Member Lopez, do you have any questions?
No questions. I support this item.
Committee Member Perello.
Well, yeah, I do. First off, I would like to compliment Chief Hamilton. It's always nice people share the credit and share the blame and everything else. Mr. Hamilton identifying Smith, Clay, and Van Atta as being instrumental in putting this thing together and with the work of all those involved. It's classy, very classy. I do have a question. Maybe it can be answered, maybe it can't. On page 255 of the staff report, there is a section, and at the very end, there is a blackout. Is there a reason for that? And if not, if it can't be answered right now, I'd appreciate that off the meeting. But I support this, and thank you very much for the work.
Member Perello, this is City Attorney. So when we list public safety employees, there are certain public and safety employees that work on confidential assignments, and their names are not to be listed in any publicly disclosed material. So that's why those are redacted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fisher. I appreciate our city attorney answering that. Thank you again. And I support this. Thanks to all involved for helping our city get whatever it can to assist in the residents moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And likewise, I'd just like to commend the interim fire chief and those involved. We are, I think, moving into a new stage of this combating this virus. And we want to make sure that we had some problems initially with the Environmental Resources Department about not having sufficient protective equipment just as a result of logistics and just going through the motions of making sure that the employees that are providing and first responders that are providing service for our great community, that they too will be protected. And so based on that, with no further questions, I'll ask for a motion on this item, please.
Move to approve.
Okay, Madam City Clerk, we have a motion by Committee Member Lopez, and do we have a second, please? And a second by myself.
Member Lopez,
Yes.
Member Perello, it looks like you're muted.
I apologize. My speaker was off. I did second it. And yes, I apologize. The speaker was off.
Okay, Chair Flynn.
Aye.
The motion carries 3-0.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to the third and final item under reports for the committee. The subject, contract for on-call internal auditing services. The recommendation is that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend the council approve $25,000 for a contract for on-call internal auditing services with Busquets and Company LLP. Ms. Klima, please.
Good morning, Chair Flynn, council members. So this morning we bring to you the contract for on-call internal auditing services. As you may recall, we made the recommendation that city management made the recommendation that we need a comprehensive internal auditing contract, but at this time, we don't have the funding for that. We haven't located the funding, and so we're going ahead just until the end of 2021 with a contract for on-call internal auditing services for $25,000. And we brought that to your committee. And at that sometime in 2021, we can revisit this concept of a comprehensive internal auditing program. Sorry. Okay, so the recommendation is that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend that the council rather approve this $25,000 contract with Vasquez and Company. This was the initial RFP schedule that was put into the RFP. We are late in coming to Finance and Governance Committee, and that's because we wanted to give the committee a little bit more time. They reviewed a lot of proposals and they conducted a couple of interviews, and we wanted to give them the time, but we will not be late coming to council. This is scheduled with your approval. This will go to council next week. The committee was comprised of 4 evaluators. Councilmember Perello and Councilwoman Basua were both on the committee. Because the internal auditor reports directly to the council, we felt it was critical that there be 2 council members who are not on this committee together to participate in that process. In addition to that, Assistant CFO Donna Ventura and Controller Tanya Chang, who are both CPAs, were also on the evaluation committee and for their professional recommendation and their understanding. So we received 7 proposals. One of those firms did not provide a complete proposal, so that left 6 written proposals to review and to score. And then the evaluation committee determined that they wanted to interview 3 firms, which they did interview. By the way, of course, we Googled these firms, as anybody else can, when we were going through this process. And the evaluation committee has determined that they're recommending Vasquez and Company. And when we interviewed Vasquez, we did ask them about the lawsuit against the County of Los Angeles, and the evaluators were satisfied with the answer. Vasquez focuses on the government sector. One of the evaluators said there seems to be a balance with Vasquez between the internal control, performance, forensic, and contract audits, and external financial audits. The proposed team has a Big 4 background, so they are good at what they do, and they have a long client list with many California cities. They also provided a lot of good examples of work done for various agencies. And one of the perks is that they offered to train the council on how to read these audits. So we make this recommendation to the committee, and we also have on the line Roger Martinez. He is going to be the lead from Vasquez. He would be the proposed CPA who is running this contract with the city, and I'm sure he could make a couple of comments or answer any questions that you have as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We do have 2 speakers, and the very first speaker is James Aragon, to be followed by James Lavery, please.
Hi, James. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for the time. I think this firm is more than well qualified, and I don't have a problem with that. I just one of the things that struck me when I was reading the staff report was the emphasis on Big Four experiences being, as part of the qualification. And this is just sort of a word of caution, and with being mesmerized by titles and such things as Big Four. Big Four experience is great for anybody who is entering in the accounting world. You do get a world of experience, but this doesn't mean that the individuals who maybe come out of that are actually, good at what they do. You can't rely on that as anything. It's to me, it's like a footnote and not really a criteria item. If you remember, there used to be Big Five. It used to be the Big Five. Arthur Andersen did not survive the WorldCom and Enron fiascos. The Big Four, all the firms are in trouble around the world, being sued, held to account, including criminal charges. Some of the leadership, my team hired a Big Four accountant / attorney. He wasn't an accountant, he was an auditor / attorney. And then we fired him after about 2.5 months because he couldn't cut it. And so anyways, and so I just think, and even, a certified, I think I've talked about this before, a certified public accounting firm, while it may be a qualifier, it's not a competence. My experience, many of the firms are not good they're really good at some things, but not others. I see that this firm in particular sounds like they are balanced across the spectrum, and so that's great. I just the word of caution is making sure that we're not mesmerized by titles and whether or not somebody works for a big accounting firm in the previous life. Thanks for your time. Have a great day and week.
Thank you very much. And we'll call the last speaker, James Lavery, please.
Hey, Jim, you have 3 minutes on the auditor item. Please begin.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, I want to say what Mr. Abergon was saying was right on about it. Doesn't matter who you work for. It's actually the person, the engagement team getting that's going to matter whether the contract is successful or not. But one of the things I was going to complain more about this, but since it's a temporary assignment, I don't know. I guess it's neither here nor there. But maybe Councilman Perrello can enlighten me. But I think Vasquez and Company bid on the first group when Price and Page got selected, and they didn't make the cut. And Councilman Perrello had me go over the proposals for them, and I think, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, was that the firm was kind of a rainmaker type, the guy running the firm, and sort of like I saw this a lot in Inglewood and in Culver City when I was working in, and they used their ethnicity and race to try to get hired. And I just hope that isn't the case here, because I read this guy's proposal initially, I wasn't too thrilled that, it seemed to be a lot of political connection, and I hope that's not the case here. $25,000 contract. So I don't know. I just want to see this program. This is one of the few good things that came of Nyloff being here, was that this program began, and it seems to be really, it's on death's door right now, and so I hope it gets revived in some reasonable, effective manner in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee Member Perrello, questions?
Yeah. I'd like to address Mr. Lavery's concerns. Yes, Jim has been very instrumental in providing information on his background with his expertise and his years of experience in the field that he has chosen to engage in his professional career. Mr. Lavery, this firm and others that are applied for this particular item on the agenda did apply. Some even mentioned not this particular one, their relationship with the past city manager in the interview process. The question about I'm not totally possibly on the same page of the definition of rainmaker, but I got an idea, but I don't know. And since I can't ask you right, I will say this. In looking at the resumes and looking at the photographs of the people involved, there were concerns on my part. And there were questions asked. There were a very specific scoring process, and cost is one of the items in the scoring process. I certainly hope that this firm did not come in to get their foot in the door based on the pictures that they presented, but the pictures they presented was a collage, a rainbow color of people, and some did not. Some didn't even have pictures of the individuals applying. In this day and age, you get some very touchy subjects bringing this stuff up. But I can tell you this, with respect to the internal auditor and the whistleblower, I take a lot of credit for bringing that to this community. And I expect a straight up deal. And when we find something rotten, get rid of it. If you have a rotten toe, eventually it'll affect your foot. And if it affects your foot, eventually it'll affect your leg. And if it affects your leg, eventually it'll affect the big parts of your body. So I believe the entire community and the entire council and the entire employee system in the city of Oxnard is for making sure there are no problems with any organization or employees or work product that is conducted on behalf of the residents of the city. I did partake into this. I don't know how the others scored, but I did have concerns on some of them. And this is the individual that won the award. And I do appreciate you pointing out the fact that it is a small contract for a period of time, can be revisited. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Lavery. Getting back to the question Mr. Aragon brought up, I do agree. Just because a person comes in, and I will tell you, in another organization or another body, people came in and they happened to have a class ring, and people could tell where that class ring came from. I couldn't tell, but people could, and they put a lot of weight on that. Well, I learned this from being married to someone that was in medicine. A lot of people graduate from a medical school. Some are the top and some are the bottom. And getting one or the other doesn't always indicate successful outcome, but judgments are made on things that oftentimes should not be made. And experience counts. And unfortunately, in some situations, you get one shot at an experience. So I thank you very much, both of you, for your comments.
Mayor, if I may add something as well. First of all, I want to correct, before I had said the lawsuit was Vasquez versus the county. It's the county versus Vasquez. But I also want to point out that we did a reference check as well. So we did call the references that they provided to us, as well as the other firms that made the interview process, asked very particular questions, the same questions of all of the reference checks. So altogether, it was not just a reliance on the fact that they were a Big Four, that they had Big Four experience, although that is an important factor. But we also looked at, or the evaluation committee also looked at the proposals themselves, the reference checks, and they interviewed and asked them a lot of questions. Thank you.
Mayor, may I add one thing I overlooked on Mr. Aragon's comments, please?
Sure.
Yes. Mr. Aragon, I want to share this with you. Our current city treasurer has placed a big value on, we should have auditors from the very top firms. We should have auditors, we should go out and solicit. In the past, we tried. they didn't apply. But one of the big things, and people putting big weights on big name companies coming in from the big four, big eight, is the current city treasurer. So I wanted to share that so you're aware of that. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Committee Member Lopez. Any questions, please?
Thank you. And I just have a comment in terms of I mean this contract. I mean, we may or may not be using it. It's on call, right? So, and that would be a decision that would be made either by the majority of the Governance and Finance Committee or a majority of the City Council. So that's something that in general the public would be aware of if we are moving forward with any type of internal audit. So I just want to remind that to those listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have two comments. One is the integrity of this selection process. What was outlined about two council members sitting on this selection process, and so there wouldn't be a Brown Act violation that there was only one member of the Finance and Governance Committee that sat on that committee. And even Councilman Perillo said he wasn't aware then of the total scoring and how, you know, the other applicants had done. But the reason that we have an internal auditor to begin with is that early on, under the previous city manager, it was suggested by myself and Councilman Perillo, so 2 out of the 5 council members, that maybe the city needed to have a independent auditor serving in a non-consultant position. So almost like an auditor controller, which in essence, I believe, and I'm trying to say this fairly, in some respects, the existing treasurer has either performed or attempted to perform that function of auditing. And so the bottom line is that we have made progress in deciding, instead of having an independent auditor, that what we would do is we would have a system where we hired a consultant, and that consultant would be again, the council would direct that consultant, not the city staff. And if the city council felt that there were areas that needed to be investigated, then the council would direct that, and it would kind of add, you know, act as a checks and balance. So that's the history for those that are listening about why we even have this internal auditor. I mean, I'd like to just say that the selection process was again kind of connected to the fact that in the past that the city did not have a contracting process that was not only laid out, but that there were abuses that took place. So I just want to conclude by saying I believe very strongly in the fact that the council and this committee in particular, that this committee in the future, I'm hoping will implement a rigorous system of checks and balances that strikes not only the balance of continuing the city's business on the one hand, but on the other, upholding the integrity, the financial integrity and honesty of spending the taxpayers' dollars. So I just want to say that I'm really excited that this process has moved forward. And I think it's important that people understand, why do we even have this item before us here at the Finance and Governance Committee? So we will be referring this on, I would imagine, based on the vote, to the full council. And I'll ask the members of the council, members of the committee right now, what's the pleasure of the committee on this item, please?
Move the recommended action.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, Madam City Clerk, we have a motion by Committee Member Perillo and a second by Committee Member Lopez. The vote, please.
Member Lopez,
Yes.
Member Perillo,
Yes.
Chair Flynn.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries 3-0.
Very well. Last item are items, future items for future agendas. And I'll start with Committee Member Lopez, if you have any items that you'd like on future agendas.
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Committee Member Perillo.
I think that this will, I believe this will fit in finance and governance. The policies the city of Oxnard has in regard to political campaign advertising, the cost that it costs the city to monitor or, remove signs, pick up signs, collect signs. I think it needs to be revisited. Either we let anything go or we deny anything from happening. I think it needs to be revisited. It is random and get a lot of complaints. And I have been involved in the political process of signs and that kind of stuff. So that's my suggestion.
Thank you very much. And I actually support that very much. I won't be around for when that comes to the, committee, but there are costs associated with enforcement of anything. And I think it does need to be taken another look at. I just want to make a suggestion to my two committee members. We're talking about the future, and I'm not saying this for a discussion. As you know, years ago, the city entered into a contract with the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting. And it's been my argument that this committee and the city council, that the most important function that they have is the spending of the taxpayers' money. And that this committee and the committee members and the future member that will be added, or future members of this committee, as well as the city council, needs to take a more engaged, a more active, and a more directive role in the city's finances. And I think it's especially important now that we've had some conflicting signals that came out of this election about Measure O, and now that Measure E has been passed. It's indicative of the fact that sometimes, perhaps, I might suggest, the spending priorities that are of the public aren't reflecting what it is that should be the priorities. And the council members and the mayor are the ones that are accountable for that. They're accountable for those spending priorities. So I would encourage my fellow committee members. I'm not asking for a future item. Well, I am asking for a future item, but that will be beyond my tenure on this committee. This committee needs to be at the forefront of choosing a process that is going to graduate, and working with the city manager and the finance director for the city council members to be more directly involved with the budgetary fiscal decisions of this city, this great city of ours. And I'm emphatically recommending that and emphasizing that as I head to, I think, one more committee meeting prior to leaving the city council. It's just so important that happens. I'll say that directly to committees members Perello and Lopez. Take an active role in the city's finances, and that process should start 6 months before the fiscal year begins. And it should be a rigorous process that involves the public, making sure that the spending priorities, again, are reflecting what the public, in fact, is saying to the elected representatives. So that's my only comment. And it looks like Committee Member Perello, I just want to make sure we don't violate the Brown Act. Go ahead, Committee Member Perello.
Yeah, I go along with that. And I agree with the including this management of the city in there. And I will use an example that occurred today. We have an individual, Mr. Stein, that continually asks about why are the residents paying fees for reclaimed water when they can't use the reclaimed water. There needs to be something where the public understands what they have, what they need, what they want, and what they desire. And there needs to be an understanding so we don't continually regurgitate the same information over and over to individuals that I believe should know better, but to individuals that are held in high esteem of the community that people assume they're never getting an answer. And I think possibly your suggestion would help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I like to, at the ending of this committee meeting, acknowledge that tomorrow is Veterans Day, acknowledging the sacrifices of all the great American men and women in our history that have sacrificed their lives and have committed themselves to service to defend this great nation of ours. And I am excited about that holiday tomorrow. I know that public gatherings are not encouraged in any way, and normally it is a grand event in Plaza Park. So I'd like to end here today. I don't know if the city manager, Mr. Nguyen, has any comments to make. I don't know if he was trying. I saw how something went from mute to non-mute. Mr. City Manager, do you have any comments to make? Okay. Looks like there are no comments, and with no further comments, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great day and have a great weekend. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thank you.